Japanese learners of Chinese is certainly not the most difficult language because, we share 2,000, characters. I mean, the two languages, Japanese and Chinese, okay, they share 2,000, characters. So that means, even before a Japanese person learns Chinese, okay, they know 2,000 characters already. So, but it seems that, okay, for many English learners, yeah, Chinese is definitely one of the most difficult languages, right? Okay, and some people say that, okay, you need to take 4 times amount of time to learn or to grasp, Chinese than, okay, if you learn, a Spanish or Portuguese. Okay, so can I ask some of our, some of our guests, a question? Okay, so Zhenshu, okay, so okay, what are the, what are the, most difficult things to learn? Okay, for what are the most difficult things for English learner, for a Barbadian learner of Chinese? Okay, so Zhenshu, what do you think is the most difficult part?
Without giving away my presentation, I would say that the characters aren't the problem at all, because they got a lot you have to do before you get into the characters. In any case, the characters aren't going to make sense if you start with the characters. So to answer your question, you gotta wait 15 minutes.
Okay, yeah, characters. Okay, so I'm gonna share. Okay, so I've been teaching, Chinese for more than a year, and my experience of teaching tells me that, okay, so the tones, okay, the Chinese have 5 tones. The tones, is probably, one of the difficult things to learn, right? Okay, so my students mess up, the tones all the time. Okay, and also I agree with Zhenshu, right? Okay, the characters, okay, recognizing characters, is difficult, and let alone writing the characters, right? And yeah, Chinese grammar is also it's different. Okay, and my students say, oh, I know the characters, right? But I cannot put the character together into a grammatically correct sentence. But today I won't focus on grammar. Okay, I will talk a little bit about tones and characters. Okay, so okay, I know the tones are difficult, right? But we can always find a way to help us learn the tone, in a more efficient way, right? Okay, so let's come to the tones. Okay, let's come to the tones. Okay, here. Let's take a look at this one. Okay, so how long have you been learning Chinese, Zhenshu?
Since February.
Since this February, right?
Yes.
Okay, so okay, do you mind if I ask you to read some words to see how well you grasp the tone? Okay, so Zhenshu, okay, read this. This is a Chinese name. This is a Chinese name I give to students.
Kong Da Wei.
Oh, your tone is very good. Okay. Good, very good. Okay, can you try the falling tone here?
Wei.
Okay, so we only change, the tone of the last character. So the first 2 characters, okay, same.
Oh, you mean that this is Da Wei?
Okay, one more time. Da.
way,
Okay,
da, way.
not bad, not bad. Okay, how about the first tone?
So putting the da, da,
Uh-huh.
da, da, way, da, way, da, way.
Oh,
Da,
okay.
way,
Okay,
da,
actually
way,
we have this, yeah, the first tone is, flat high. We say 大
da,
微,
way, da,
微,
way,
大微,
da, way,
say 大
da,
微.
da, way,
Good, very good. Okay, do you want to try these, the second?
da, way, da, way,
Not bad, not bad. Okay, I think you have a
da,
talent for language.
way.
You have a talent for language. Okay, so this is, how I teach tones. So I have 5, software engineering students, right? Okay, so I said to them, okay, there are 5 of them in the class. You are siblings, so I'm gonna give you, similar names. Okay.
Oh,
You see, okay, so you have a 3-character name, right? Okay, only the last character, only, the sound, only the sound of the last character, differs. Okay, and then, when I call them to answer questions, yeah, they need to listen very carefully, and so that can, they can identify, who I'm calling, and in this way I can help them, learn the tone. Okay, so Shujan, can you try the neutral tone? My students, they, mess up the neutral with the falling tone. Can you try this? Neutral. Da, da.
me?
Uh-huh.
Da, way, da, way,
The neutral one.
way.
The neutral one is very soft and brave.
Da, way, da, way,
Okay, close. Yeah, very close.
da,
Close.
way.
We say 孔. This is a 孔大伟.
Hong, da, way,
Yeah, 大伟.
da, way,
Okay, 大伟. And this is a 大卫.
way.
So, yeah, the difference between the falling and the neutral is that, okay, well,
It's softer. It's
very short. Yeah, this
yeah.
one is soft and short, very short. Okay, so good. Okay, I think your tone is yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Okay, so and also we have this. We have this tone song. Okay, I shared. Oh, sorry. What's wrong with this? Let me see. Sorry, no. I also share this tone song with my students. This helps a lot. Okay, this tone song goes like this. Okay, so we have 6. We have 6 single finals, right? Okay, we have this a, o, e, u, u, right? 6 single finals. Okay, we have this song, which goes like this. We have this o, right? Okay, so the students like this song. This song, does certainly help them to to distinguish the different tones, right? Okay, and also I believe that many Chinese teachers of Chinese, okay, they they use the similarities of sounds in Chinese and English to help the students grasp the tone. Okay, so I believe that many of you are probably familiar with this this comparison, right? Okay, so it's like, okay, so let's take A as an example. Okay, okay, the first sound, okay, is yeah, okay, if you go to a doctor, right, it's okay, the doctor will ask you to open your mouth. Then, right, you have this right, this sound. And then the second sound, okay, if the doctor says, oh, you have a bad, tooth, and you were surprised, and you say, what? What? Yeah, what? What? It's like asking a question. Yeah, the second sound, is like, the second tone is like asking a question, right? Okay. For example, if you say, is this your dad? Dad, like ma. Okay, dad, or is this your mom? Okay, mom or dad. Okay, so, and then the third tone, okay, is similar to the, English thinking sound, like, well, like ma. Okay, well, okay, so if the doctor asks you whether, you need treatment, okay, it must be, the treatment is costly. You say, well, it's a thinking sound, right? Okay, and then, okay, the doctor says, okay, it will cost you 5,000. Okay, you say, yeah, no, that's a very affirmative no. Okay, that's the, some people say it's an angry sound. Some people say it's a, denying sound. Okay, or it's just, yeah. So this is I know the tones are difficult, right? Okay, but okay, we can always find a way to help students learn the tone. Okay, Theory 还有几分钟啊？我就讲到这儿吧，要不今天。
没关系，都可以。您还要讲也可以。
Okay, let's quickly take a look at the writing and recognizing characters. So I know let's see, characters. I know characters are difficult, right? But okay, but luckily you don't have to grasp a large vocabulary. Let's see. So Helen, tell me. Okay, so how many how many words does a ninth grader need to grasp?
How many?
Yeah, a ninth grader of English, learners of English, or Bayesian learners of English. Bayesian people. I mean, how many words does a Bayesian need to, a ninth grader, in Barbados need to grasp?
I am not too sure. It's difficult for me to answer, but that's I've never really think about it.
In words.
Because also I am not sure. I cannot answer that question.
Okay, so here, a ninth grader in China needs to know 3,500 words. But Chinese words are very powerful. If you know, characters, not words, characters. Okay, if you know 3,000 and 500 characters, there's no problem for you, to read newspaper, magazines, right? That's a ninth grader, okay, or ninth grader. It's we call it ninth grader, right? Okay.
What is our equivalent here? What is a ninth grader? A ninth grader? How old?
6 years of elementary school and 3 years of junior high.
Oh, so she means like a O level.
12. So, no.
12.
Sorry. No. Let me see. Okay. Like
12-year-old.
How many? Okay, so
学毕业吗？
here, sure, plus. Okay, Grace, how old is a ninth grader in China?
Ninth graders 9 年
这是初中毕业生。
15. Somebody is saying 15.
15.
Yeah.
15.
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah. Okay. So, and for SHA 4, right? Okay, the vocab, yeah, not vocab. We say, okay, you need to be able to recognize and use,
1,200.
yeah,
1,200 words.
recognize. That's 1,200, right? Okay, yeah. So one thing I want to say that, Chinese characters are very powerful. For example, if you know this, okay, so anybody recognize this, this words? Okay, so Stefan.
弥勒赛黄瓜，
Okay, so yeah, if you know this character, okay, you don't need to learn the words. Probably you can, yeah, you can guess. Okay, this is guá, this is huang, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Two new characters. You put these two new characters together, you get a new word, and okay, you pretty much guess. You can pretty much guess, what this new word means. But okay, if you tell me, oh, this cucumber, right? I know the sound, but I have no idea what cucumber represent. Okay, but okay, Chinese characters, they are powerful. Okay, you put two characters together, you got a new word. Okay, so huang is yellow, right? Gua, I mean, yeah, we have watermelon, right? Xigua, right? Gua is I think it's a big fruit. I think, yeah. Okay, so huang gua.
totally.
Good. So yeah. Okay, I will stop here today. Okay, thank you guys.
Okay, thank you, our teacher, Vero. And the next guest is my student. She just said she had learned Chinese from February, but to be honest, all of the learning time, put together, maybe just 2 months.
Yeah, her timeline is very good, I believe.
Yeah, and she passed HSK2 in last month.
Oh.
So today invite her as guest, as today's our activities guest. Okay, now welcome our.
Very good. Congratulations.
谢谢你。
老师，你停止一下你的屏幕分享。
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. The topic is Chinese the most difficult language to learn. I guess I could say that is widely accepted. It is considered one of the most difficult languages, but that was not my experience. That being said, however, there are some things I think you would have to consider if you are embarking on a journey to learn a foreign language or a foreign culture. Here in Barbados, we teach the children when they go into school about the 3 R's, and the 3 R's are supposed to be reading, writing, and arithmetic. And for me, it was the same with the learning Chinese, and for me it was respect, research, respect, and repetition. And when I said research, I went into the first session knowing nothing. I didn't do anything because I wanted to hear Chinese being taught by a Chinese person. And what I would suggest is explore the territory and the people and the origins of the language that you're going to learn. Listen to the way the native language is spoken by the native of the region. Like there's so many communities making up the Republic of China, and there are just as many local dialects. And I realized that Mandarin, well, that's the common language and considered the official language. Like I said, when I started in Chinese, I was one of 18 business students. And by the end of the class, I couldn't spell, but I still knew how to say ni hao and ni jintian zemayang, and he taught us what yao shema minza, and we played around within the class. So to me, they were just universal phrases. Those are, you go anywhere, you know how to say hello, you know how to say goodbye. That can be learned in a matter of minutes. The second thing for me is to have a respect for the language, because with every language and every culture, there's an underlying code of conduct. In English, we teach our kids to say please and thank you, and to address either persons in authority or persons of seniority with ma'am or sir or auntie or uncle. And I found in Chinese, there's a similar concept. And if you understand that role, it helped me to understand the reasoning behind structuring the characters. They made sense when I heard the stories behind what made up the strokes, how the strokes went, and how you formed almost on that little grid, how you formed the strokes to make up the characters. That helped me to remember then how to actually form them and which one came first. And for me, repetition is also important, because it is not your language. It is foreign to your brain and your mouth, because there are some sounds in Chinese that we do not have an English equivalent flat out. Our mouth just does not have that tone in it. And the only way to learn or to get that tone to be part of your repertoire is to practice it. There's no amount of seeing it or hearing it that can get you get you to say it. And there's some of them that, in order to sound what my tutor wanted me to say, I had to look at it like a musical score sheet. Like how you have soprano and alto and tenor and bass. I had to put that on the music staff, and I was almost singing. I remember when Grace introduced us to the opera. Oh, that was a class act. But to me, when you hear a male voice, it pitches different to a female voice. And when I do not understand the inflection in the sentence, I just sing it how it sounds to me. I sing it and I can dance up and down on that staff until I get it. But for me, it is always a musical thing first. If I cannot get it understood, I go back to my music staff and I will sing my way till I get it. Because for me, I find to have one character by itself is okay. But when you have a string of characters, like when you have noir and you sliding, and then you get it again when you have the one before, like eager, and you're saying eager, and then you're putting it together in different words. I sing in it until I understand where that word ended and the other word started. I'll sing my way through. So to me, you just have to repeat it. You have to keep repeating. But I find nowadays, different to previously, you have online platforms where you can hear men speaking. You can hear women speaking. You have programs for children if you want to start with Apple and Ball, or you have business apps that can give you a sentence at a time, put you in a workspace where you are hearing conversations that you would have at work or at school or at play or in a restaurant, in a cafe. You can put in what you want to get familiar with. And but look, we're here on Zoom now. We don't have to have pen and paper. We can have interfacing with people who, like me, only have like 2-3 months at this. You have persons who are actually speaking and living the language. And I think these tools, we just need to use them. You also have YouTube videos, Duolingo. Well, I personally like the Duolingo because that has the viewing. You can see the words. You can replay the way the male voice is saying it. You can turn then and use Google Translate. Google Translate will translate your English into Chinese. I mean, my 3 top are the YouTube, the Duolingo, and the Google Translate. They work for me. And because I was using them, I can say, 我最喜欢他们. Those are mine. Those are mine. I use them daily, and I make sure that I get at least half hour daily using one of those mediums. And I also find that the tones are pitched depending on who is actually speaking. They pitch differently. So if you get accustomed to hearing one person speak, it takes you a while before you can understand when you go and you hear another person speaking. The pitch is different. So unless you are you get to hear a lot of different, I call them songs. You have to expose yourself, and then you start to realize the slurring and the dancing that they're doing between the songs. Yeah, so for me, I quite enjoyed my journey so far. I don't know if you have any questions with regards to what worked for me or what my experience was.
Okay, our teacher. Go ahead.
Question. Yeah, so I can see you really enjoy your language learning. And when we talk, you speak Chinese, you really shocked me. So one question, I feel that 2 questions maybe. What's the 3R? I need to write it down, and give me one example of how you sing it. How you sing it? One example. Yeah. Yeah. How did you sing a character?
Okay, the 3 R's first. It was research,
Okay.
respect,
Respect. Yes. Good.
and repetition.
Repetition. Okay. Good. Thank you.
And to show you how I sing them.
Yes, please.
Language learning Chinese, not for English.
Yeah. Not for English.
All right. When say for example, this was just me. I wrote the characters, and then I put the pinyin in red. I didn't have a clue what the thing was saying, so I played it. So I would just listen to how this, ni de Heize sei chose xia. And the shang and the sha used to kill me. I could not tell initially. It sounded like the same thing. Shang, xia, shang, shang. And I found at first I had to open my mouth wide, like shang and xia. And then I realized when I'm watching Chinese people, they're not tearing open their mouth like that. And then I realized it's ain't nothing to do with your mouth. It is how you pronouncing, how the word is coming out your throat. So I don't have to, I ain't gonna open my mouth so wide no more. I sing it, and in singing it, I just I can hear the difference between the xia and the shang. You can hear it when you make the effort to get the song that you're hearing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, let's welcome next guest.
Wait, I'm not finished. I'm not
Huh?
finished.
You didn't finish?
I'm not finished.
Sure, go on,
I
share.
want to take this opportunity to thank, first of all, Mr. Lu
Okay.
for
You're
introducing me to the world of China and Chinese. I want to thank Grace for teaching me how to make dumplings and inviting me into her home. And most of all, I want to thank my dear fairy,
Take a video. Yeah.
my
Okay.
fairy, who is not only my Hanyu Laosher, but she is my youngest noir.
You are. Yeah.
So
Daughter.
yeah, I finished now.
Okay. Thank you.
谢谢你。
不客气，不客气。
Thank you.
Thank you. 谢谢你。
Okay. Let's welcome next guest, Helen. Okay, welcome.
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Ni hao. Ni
Good
hao, ma.
afternoon, 你好.
Right. My name is Hélène Zamor. I am French. I'm from Martinique. So I have had the first time I learned Chinese would have been in 2015. I did only 1 year, unfortunately, because of my job, because I teach French at the university. And I always wanted to learn Chinese, but also, you know, to go to China as well. So my experience in terms of learning Chinese was a great experience, was interesting because what was difficult for me was the tone. And if you don't practice, I find with any language at all, but especially with Chinese, where you have all those accents. Well, I found at least some similarities with French because of the accent, when I was looking at the word, I guess I should say the word way, with you have like a hyphen on the top of it, then you have like a upside down accent circumflex, like whereas French has the accent circumflex, like ba, like for instance the number 8, ba, the character, I remember that well because it reminds me of French with the accent circumflex. And then I saw like an acute accent on the E. So for me, it was like, even though the language might have all, to me, each language has its own challenges. There are no languages that are easy. Some languages may be more approachable in terms of the grammar than others, but to me, each language has its own challenges. And you have to accept, when you learn a foreign language in general, not only Chinese, but French, Portuguese, or Spanish, or German, you have to prepare yourself to practice and also to do a lot of work on your own. The tutor cannot do everything for you. You may not understand, but you have to, and I like what Desiree said, everything is repetition. And especially if you don't have time, that's what had happened to me eventually, and I found myself to have to give up. But what I do every now and then, not as often as I would like to, I would go on any website, and I'm curious to know, sometimes to look at the particles, because I did linguistics at UWI as well. So I have been using a lot of what I call breaking down a sentence to see what is present tense, what is the subject pronoun. And so I have done that for all the languages I've learned so far. Well, in French, I was exposed to that from primary, secondary school, right through to the lycée, the baccalaureate. And then when I came to university and I did linguistics, I did it in English. And trust me, linguistics helped me a lot to understand how to break down the sentence. And if you can do that as well, that help. What I have noticed with Chinese is that whereas French and English have markers for past tense, Chinese doesn't seem to have that, unless I'm wrong, because I didn't go further enough to see, but where you have all those relative pronouns, you hardly have that in Chinese. So in a way, the grammar to me was fun, because I'm saying, wow, it's less constraints than maybe French, Spanish, Portuguese, and English. And you can find some words sometimes when you the advice I'm giving to anybody who learn a foreign language, try to find it. It is true, each language has a different sound system, but somehow, although the sound system might be different, but yet you may find one or two sounds that you can like. The word I had enjoyed the most was the word luce, because luce to me remind me of French, of the vowel U, which I find that English-speaking people in general have problems to distinguish between U and U, because it's two different sounds. OU, both the combination of O and U together give you a sound like you. However, the U, the vowel U, is pronounced as U. And I found luce so nice. I found a word close to my language. And also in writing luce, you have those two dots on the top of the U, which we have in French as well. For instance, you have, why we have those two dots in French is to separate those vowels and to also distinguish between meanings. So that is why I will say also, when the teacher corrects you, sometimes you may be frustrated because you want to get it right. All of us want to get things right and right away. But learning a language is a process. You can reach the highest level. You got to understand that you didn't grow up speaking the language. It's still there's something foreign in your brain that your brain somehow will not accept it, because especially if you learn a foreign language at an adult stage, children tend to learn faster because the muscles are more flexible. But when you start learning a foreign language at 10 plus, 15 years old and an adult, your muscles are already formed. That's why you have an accent. So I was going back to this mais in French, M-A-I-S. It means however. And you have maïs with the two dots on the I, means corn. So we have to bear in mind that when the tutor actually correct you, it's for your own good, because what's happening is that when you start mispronouncing those words badly, it takes a while to get rid of bad habits because your brain has already internalized. And then you can find yourself in difficulties, because if you mean bag and you pronounce it in a different way, it will mean something else and it will cause problems. So you have to be patient. And I also enjoy there was a phrase I had liked as well. For instance, when you want to find out if your teacher is there. So I'm going to take an example. Maybe okay, Vera, for instance, Lee. Usually the surname come first, Laucher so 李老师在呢, and that's a phrase that stayed in my head. I don't know why. There can be phrases you can fall in love with. There might be other things you may not like much, but it is part of the language learning process. And also immersion is important, and reading a lot. So that's something I want to do when I will have less work, is go back gradually into it, because I have not had the time to reach the level to learn the characters. The only character that I love so much is the accent circumflex, the ba, on ba, because how I play mahjong once or twice, and this is where I saw ba, and I fell in love. I said, oh, it's close to my language, close to French. So, and never compare yourself. That's another thing I will say to anybody as a language learner, because I consider myself a language learner still, because English is not my first language, and I'm still learning. I'm still discovering things all the time. Never compare yourself with somebody else. You have people who learn at a faster rate. You got people who are already exposed to the language before, but that doesn't mean because you may not understand how the tones work right away, or you may not understand how to structure a sentence in Chinese. It doesn't mean that you will never succeed. It might take a longer time, and with patience with your tutors, you should be okay. But you have to be willing to put your personal effort into it, and also to listen to what the teacher is saying to you. If they correct you, please do not say, don't be vexed. Do not look at it as something bad. It's because they want to make sure that you don't stuck in the bad habits. So that is what I wanted to say about my experience with the Chinese language. And I simply saying that I really enjoy the basic that I did. There's some phrases that are still in my head, and I know the numbers. I still have to go back. And also you find that as you go into the language, you can pick up you can be able to identify keywords and also particles that will mean something. And I know in Chinese, because we are accustomed about present tense markers. So when we learn Chinese, at least for me, when I started the first sentences, I'm saying, but something is missing. But it is not that something is missing. It's just that our brain, we learn at school, we have the subject pronoun, you have a present marker, you have a past marker, and so forth. But sometimes in Chinese, sometimes, yes, you have that. But also, as I said, I was amazed by the past tense sentences. So I'm not going to take too much of anybody's time right now, but I want to thank Grace, I want to thank Vera and the CI to have allowed me to come and share my experience, and so forth. 再见。
再见，Thank
谢谢
you，Thank you。Thank
Next,
you so much, Helen.
okay, next is Vicky. Are you ready? Yeah, okay. Let's welcome Vicky.
OK， 大家好，下午好。
下午好。
我们今天商量一下 为什么中文是最难学的语言 Why is Chinese the most difficult language to learn? And I've put together a few slides. I see Desiree's eyebrows shooting up as I started in Chinese, so I will revert to English and say some key things in Chinese. Yes, why is Chinese so difficult for foreigners, for us foreign students? And I have to identify with you, Desiree, because when I went to China, when I went to China, I was like you. I knew absolutely no Chinese, so the language acquisition was immediate, and I would say it was exposed. It was very different for me from how I acquired Spanish and French in school, because I had firsthand experience of practicing what I learned in the classroom out on the street. So from that point of view, I'm going to make this presentation today. Okay, so looking at the 4 points that I'm going to highlight, I thought I would incorporate along with my 4 points a thought of Confucius, a famous Confucius quote which I found on the internet, and it says, "I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand." And for me, that is very important for language acquisition. I hear 我听我不记我忘了 I see 我看我记了 I do 我做还有我明白 So language is actually doing, and I identify my language acquisition with this. I was able to learn and actually go out and practice, so I understood. All right, so the 4 areas that I'm going to look at today for language acquisition: tones, 声调, pronunciation, 发音, grammar, 语法, Chinese characters, 汉字. So, tones, first of all, others, Vera and Desiree and Helen, they made some very interesting comments related to tones, and I will add my comments to that. Yes, so, first of all, before I go.
We let someone in.
So, before I discuss the tones, you know that studying Chinese, as I explained there, you have my mother tongue is English. Helen's mother tongue is French. My mother tongue is English. So the English speakers have a different, have some similar experiences and yet different experiences from other foreign language learners. But one thing that I can say that is common, the majority of foreign language learners do have problems with the pronunciation, with tones, and you know, so those are areas that we will look at. Some of the difficulties I will highlight. All right. Right. So tones, 声调. If we look at the combination qi, and this is a difficulty that I had on the street when I came out of class. I'd go to where I was Beijing Yuan, and they had a little market area called Wudaokor
Yes.
in the back there of the college. And so we would go out there, Michelle Hinkson and I, we would go and try to practice what we learned in class. So we go to buy our food or whatever. So if I wanted 7 of whatever, and I said chi, the person, the vendor would look at me like, what is she trying to say? So we were really exposed to, at a very early stage in the language acquisition, we were very exposed to what it really meant. If you got your tones wrong, you were not understood. So I say this to show the chi, chi. And Vera made a very interesting way of trying to remember the pronunciation and the intonation of the tones, where she said the chi. I like that one. The chi is like asking a question. It goes up. Yeah. So you have to be innovative in teaching the foreign student how to try to remember the tones. So yes, chi, as we know, is 7. If you get that wrong, you could possibly say chi, which means to ride. Or you might end up saying chi, which means to rise, to get up, chi lai, chi chuang. Or if you say chi, the person would think that you might be shang ti, angry with them.
Yes,
So you have to be very careful of trying to get the tone right. And out of all of that, you might just want to be saying 7, chi. So yeah. So that is one difficulty that the foreign language learner has with Chinese language. The next one that I want to highlight is, let me go down.
Yes.
Pronunciation. Fine. So in addition to the tones, the Chinese phonetic system is very different from the Romanized system, the English. In my case, I'm a native English speaker, so I'm comparing it to the English speaking system. The Chinese has initials and then their finals. The initials are just one consonant, but then the finals, this is where it gets all tricky, because you can have a final that just has one vowel, like what we did just now with yi. That's an initial and a final, yi, with one vowel. But then you get with 2, like I, so guai, and then you have 3, guai, xiao, and combinations that we don't have in our English speaking environment. So for that reason, the pronunciation would be difficult, and I appreciate Desiree's approach with singing to try and acquire that language, the pronunciation accurately. So in my case, what I did was a lot of repetition. We had a lot of drills for us to try and repeat and imitate the sounds of a native speaker, so that we could try to get them as accurate, say them as accurately as possible. So in English phonetics, they don't have a lot of these sounds that the Chinese have. Yin yu yin mei yao 这个声 比如 I have some examples there. 小 and I said 请 谁, those are all final compositions with in one case one single letter initial, and in the last case a 2-letter initial. So you have shi, zhi, chur. That also is a peculiarity of Chinese initials and the finals, where you have 2 letters to form an initial. There are many dialects. The other problem with the pronunciation and being understood, which really impacted me when I first went on my first school trip, only 3 months after being in China, when I got down to Guangdong, I couldn't understand anything. Was I really studying or not? Did I waste my time or what? The Cantonese was totally different. As I got further south, the pronunciation of the north seemed to get less and less, because in the southern parts of China, as close as Shanghai, you would hear rather than 旁边, you hear 旁边. The hard R, the retroflective hard R, seemed to disappear. Also, instead of saying a word like 老师 in the north, you might find the word 老师. The pronunciation comes down to something like that, 老师, as opposed to 老师. So with all of those differences, plus different lexicon, which would be different vocabulary meaning different things. By the time I got down to the Guangdong province, I was like, did I really learn any Chinese at all? And people were not understanding me, even when it was totally different. So that in itself made the language acquisition totally complex. Here in this slide, I have some examples of some of the dialects there. Now we know Putonghua, which is Mandarin Chinese, is the main standard one. And then I've listed a few there called Gan, Hakka, Wu, Xiang, and they call Yue, which is Cantonese dialect. So I just wanted to highlight those areas. That is apart from, in terms of the pronunciation, apart from the phonetic aspect, it is the dialectal form, the dialectal diversity of the language in China, which makes the pronunciation also difficult. Grammar, 语法. Now, 语法，中文的语法不太难，但是不容易。What a paradox. Why I say the grammar isn't difficult is that an English speaker can identify with the structure of the basic structure of a Chinese sentence. You have your subject, your verb, and your object. 我现在在学习语言，我学习英语。I am studying. Your subject,我. Your verb, study, 学习, and 英语 is your object. So the basic structure is the same as English. It, however, gets more complex. That's why I said it's not easy. Then you have the typical Chinese particles added to this. You're on the street and you hear, oh, 好啊, oh, 你呢?你身体好吗? Look, those are all examples of the use of the particle in everyday Chinese language and on the street language. Those are things that you have that the foreign language learner has difficulty with. When do I use no? When do I use lo? When do I use ma? When do I use ah? You know, it could be really a whole potpourri of difficulty, and the class could end up in all sorts of uproar, trying to figure out where to put the particles. And really, is for emphasis, and the lo can be a past tense marker. It can also be added on to a sentence. Ma, generally used for a question. So those are that is an interesting experience there. And then we have the measure words. Now in English we do have measure words. The juice, we do have measure words, like we say a dozen eggs, but they are not used as extensively as in Chinese language. So for that reason, learning a measure word and ibon shu, it is a process of learning. You have to learn them. There's no other way about it for a non-native speaker. You have to learn them. That poses a problem to a difficulty. But fortunately, there's g. So if you're not sure, we were always told in class, if you're not sure, just use g, and you should be understood. Hanzi, the integral part of Chinese culture and language. You cannot study the language without looking at the characters, because the language evolved out of the characters. It is a big cultural thing. So the Chinese characters, and that is the most difficult part of learning, one of the most difficult part of learning Chinese for the foreigner. Reading the characters and writing the characters. 学习读和写汉字是最难。So, the characters evolved over time, and learning to write them can be a form of relaxation. If you are up to calligraphy, that would help you in your language acquisition. It also helps you to understand where the character comes from and the meaning of the character. For example, like Ren, the one for person. Once you learn the history behind the character, then when you look at that, you won't have any problem. You would see Ren as two legs of a person there planted on the ground. So you immediately know that means a person. There's no other way about it. You just have to learn the character, and then the other problem that goes with the character writing will be the stroke order, the number of strokes, which in school we always say, oh, tai ma fan, that, but you have to do it in order to learn to write. So generally speaking, that is my overview of the difficulty of learning Chinese characters and acquiring the language. I highlighted in this short presentation the difficulty with the pronunciation, the phonetic system, the tones, some areas of grammar that may be difficult, and finally the Chinese characters. And that is basically where I will conclude for here. And my references, I looked at a few books. I perused an old dictionary that I have to see, it had some information on the phonetic system and so on. I looked at some books for how language acquisition was acquired and taught. One example was Learn Chinese with Me, and I did some research on the internet. Okay, so that's my presentation in a nutshell. Thank you very much for inviting me to do this. 谢谢你们。如果有问题可以现在问。If you have any questions, you can ask now.
Okay, thank you, Vicky. Anyone have a question? If there are no question, we can welcome next one, Chris.
Oh, Chris.
Yeah.
I have a question, but it's not necessarily language related. It's just asking. So what is your favorite part of China that you had visited when you were there, Vicky?
For me, my favorite part of China. Well, actually, leaving out the linguistic part, I enjoyed going to Hong Kong when I was there because the weather was generally warmer in in the summer months. Apart from that, Guilin was very nice, the mountain hill, and it was very picturesque. And it was there that I was able to go out early in the morning and see persons practicing Tai Chi. So, I mean, they have that doing in Beijing too, but generally speaking, I wasn't getting up early in the morning to go to see Tai Chi being performed in the park because I had to hurry and get ready for school. Yeah. So, during the winter break, I got to appreciate the difference between the southern part and the northern part. I enjoyed Beijing as well. I don't know how I can say which I prefer. I enjoyed Beijing, particularly one of my favorites was Yiheyuan, which is the summer palace. That offers so much. The boat ride, relaxing, the pagodas.
And then my last thank you. And then my last question or comment is that after having such a shocking experience after your first 3 months going to Guangzhou and realizing the difference between all these different dialects, specifically Cantonese and Mandarin, did you ever get a chance or ever had a desire to learn Cantonese now that you have mastered Mandarin?
Well, I can't even say that I've mastered Mandarin. It's still a work in process after so many years. But there's so much more to learn. Mandarin has my hands full. I haven't even pursued Cantonese.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, 多谢. So thank you very much, Vicky, for your presentation. And then I will just continue on from there. I'd have to say, really, it's so interesting hearing all the different aspects of language techniques and so forth. Just again, for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Albert Christopher Lee. I am with the Chinese Association of Barbados, and I'm a third generation Chinese person who has grown up in the Caribbean. And so my experience with learning Chinese has been very interesting and very different for two main reasons. One being that, I'll be honest, I don't think in terms of learning languages, as some of my colleagues here know, because I also studied French with them, that I'm not always the most structured person when it comes to language. And for me, the understanding and really learning and taking to a language really was more tied into understanding the culture and being able to apply it. Because a lot of my background is in tourism and culture. So it was always more interesting, and I became more enthused when I moved or lived in a country that spoke that particular language. So I remember in speaking to, let's say, my first example of learning French, that as many years as I studied French, the French only really became the most alive when I went to France for the first time. And similarly, I had the opportunity to go to China, specifically Beijing, 4 years ago, and I lived there for about 4 years. But even then, I didn't know any Chinese at all, or any Mandarin specifically, but there was a point in my youth where my mother, because my family does come from Guangdong province, we tried to learn Cantonese. That fell by the wayside. And so learning Mandarin, I started from scratch. And I really have to say that being someone of Chinese descent, there was immense pressure. So that really is where my journey started, where a lot of people saw me and the assumption is, well, you should speak Chinese. Why don't you speak Chinese? And then they'd call me the term 香蕉. So they'd be like, oh, so you're like a banana. And so I remember hearing that term, and I asked some of my Chinese friends back, about it. And, it wasn't the best feeling to know, like, okay, so you're kind of like the fake Louis Vuitton of within it comes to languages. You look like the real thing, but maybe not so much. But over time, I started to really make a decision to learn it and to understand first the culture, because I have to say the first 2 years of being in China really wasn't spent focusing on Chinese as much as it was just trying to understand Chinese people and getting adjusted to Beijing and making contacts for business purposes. And then the last 2 years that I was in China is when I started to learn the language, upon which by then I had known enough for conversation to a point, but then I never learned the background of learning the characters and learning reading. So I kind of found myself in a really interesting position where when it came to speaking or the oral component of the courses, sure, okay, I can go with it. I've always been apt at mimicking accents. So people say, oh, 你的发音很好. I'd be like, oh, your accent's so good. I'm like, yeah, but you fa, no, horrible. 不太好. So that was really, really the beginning. And as Vicky said before, it's really a continuous learning process. And even up to now, I still have that pressure, because I think to myself, I really should learn and speak more, and I really should try to make a greater effort. But like many of you here in this chat, because we're working and our time can sometimes be taken up with other things, but it is so essential in this process to not only just study it from a purely grammatical standpoint, but utilize the tools such as listening to the songs or watching movies, because helping to understand more about the cultural context, I've really found has always really helped when it comes to learning the language, and also wanting to understand more about this particular area of study. I think that if we can, based on all these different tips, it's great. And I think that what's really we've seen in these different presentations so far is that every person learns differently. I'm sure that many of you, if not all, were privy to being given that sound piece of advice. If you want to learn Chinese, just find a Chinese girlfriend or boyfriend. It's as simple as that. Hey, once you find a Chinese partner, your Chinese is going to pick up. I feel like some people in this group who shall be left unnamed probably benefited more from that than others. Especially when it came to integrating within the Chinese community. I have to take a moment and give that commendation, especially to Sir Stefan Lord, who's in the chat right now, because I think that not only did he, before going to China, really have an open mind and attitude of integrating and adjusting to speaking to Chinese people in as much as he could, but I think that he was an inspiration when we went in the same year together to go and start our journey in China, and how he really started to take on both the Chinese language component as well as understanding and integrating the Chinese community component. So I think he really showed me that that's really one of the benefits, that the more you open yourself up and the more you become more receptive to this way of life and to this new community and new language, that the faster that your language skills will probably develop. So having said that, I would say that for me, because I'm going to be honest, my little presentation is really not going to be based on the technical side. It's really just on the fact that when I think about myself, and by extension, other Chinese in the diaspora who do not speak Mandarin or didn't grow up speaking that language, I think that a lot of it boils down to just, it's about adopting. When I think about us as well as any other language learner, it's about just having the right attitude. It's really about having the right attitude. It's about recognizing the beauty and diversity of humanity and all these different cultures. And so I think that if especially with all the new digital tools that are available, whereby in the past it isn't a case where you have to be in China to learn Chinese now, or you have to only look at a book to learn Chinese, that there's so many different ways to make learning Chinese more creative and more engaging. And then on top of that, you can speak to other people. And now that Barbados has a growing community of Mandarin speakers, whether they be of Chinese descent or not. And so I think that it's these type of platforms that are really great, that we can talk about not only our challenges, our tips, our tools, but also trying to understand a bit more about our shared experiences and how we can kind of utilize these types of digital platforms and physical persons to better ourselves, because we all probably feel that there's so much more for us to improve upon. We all probably feel like we don't know enough. We all probably feel like we make so many different mistakes at whatever, like those of us who I'm sure start at HSK 2 and those of us who are probably right now past HSK 6. But even that person still feels like, my goodness. I remember there was a young gentleman who's now a friend of mine, and he studied Chinese. He worked in Chinese CCTV, and when he was doing his Chinese language training, he knew all the Chongyus and everything. And I was like, man, I can't stand next to this person because he's not Chinese and he knows all these Chongyus and knows how to put them in. And it was so, but at the end of the day, I learned how to, I guess after spending more time with him and building our relationship, our friendship, it's about to say, hey, don't look at anybody else that, as somebody said in the chat already, I think it was Helen and also I'm sure Vicky, it's not about comparing yourself. It's about sharing that knowledge. It's about building each other up. It's about saying, hey, we all have something more to learn, and this is how I can help you. And I'm sure there's different ways that even the most basic of us can help as well in terms of our approach. In my case, it's more about promoting that, trying to understand the cultural context. So again, I would like to thank the Confucius Institute for this opportunity to just share my story. And again, yes, if anybody does want to connect, I'm sure that there's so much I can learn from you, both from your experiences in China and how it has helped to shape your perception, because a lot of things that interest me are kind of building that relationship between China and Barbados. And again, also because this is in the context of language, I'd love to hear more of the different types of tips and tools that some of you may have to improve the language skills, because again, everybody just really learns differently. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Let's welcome next guest, that's Joycelyn. Welcome, Joycelyn.
大家好，下午好。Desiree， 我恭喜你，做HSK 2级考试很好， Good afternoon, everyone. I congratulate Desiree for passing the HSK2 exam. That's very good. Now, like Albert Lee, looking at the question, is Chinese one of the most difficult language to learn? I'm going to look at it from the perspective of attitude and mindset. Because if you are a positive or optimistic or negative or pessimistic person, it determines whether you will be successful in learning any language. So I start with that premise. And therefore, it would have a bearing on why the language becomes difficult for you. For example, if you want to start to study the Chinese language and you adopt the approach, like if you say that it's difficult, then it would definitely be difficult for your progress and your learning. Another thing, how do you view China as a country? How do you view the people? How do you view the culture? If you do not like something about them, maybe their food, their laws, then your experience will be difficult in learning the language. However, if you are motivated, you will try hard, even if you consider it to be the most difficult language. Now, for me, I love languages. Like Vicky and Desiree and myself, we attended the same secondary school. And for me, I was Spanish and also French. And Helene, I will tell you, before Chinese, French was my favorite language. I love it's so cultured. I love it. And therefore, however, unlike French, I was able to immerse myself in the Chinese language. And that is why I have become so passionate about it. And for me, I love knowledge. I love new things. So when it comes to change management, and that's what learning any language is all about, especially Chinese language, if you have an approach that you can go ahead, you can grab it and you can immerse yourself in it, well then, yeah. So that has been my approach to it. Any language, I really immerse myself, and I was exposed. Really, what piqued my interest is when I was studying for my master's, I had an assignment to do cultural differences between England and China, and I recognized that language and culture were barriers to learning the language. So it piqued my interest. And therefore it was, Vicky was my first Chinese teacher in 2000, I think 2014, no, 2004, no, 2006, yes. Same time, yes, Desiree. And then because I worked in government, I had the opportunity to go to China to study the language. And when I got there, they decided that I would be level 3. Now in Barbados, I wasn't even level 1 because I was only exposed to the fundamentals of it and learning certain words. So it was a great challenge. I was in a class with only characters. I had to read, I had to listen. We had exams and everything in characters. So I was really thrown in at the deep end. But what I can tell you, because of the positive outlook that you have, when we had our first reading test, what I did, like some people would have done, I went to a native and I asked them to read for me, and I read back what they said. And actually, I came first in reading. Now, picture this. I was never exposed to that level. There were persons who would have attended university in there because there were 90-something of us from around the world. And they would have studied at university to the highest level. Some of them even worked in the Chinese field. And for me, I barely had my foot wet in the water. So that is something that, you know, you have to do. You can't sit back and say, oh, I can't get it done, but a positive attitude and go ahead and get it done. However, in terms of listening, it was very difficult because your ears have to become attuned. Remember, it's a change management going on in your brain. And therefore, like others said, I think either Desiree or Helen made the point. Your brain is now have to wrap around this new language. Your whole mouth, your tongue is involved. All of your members are involved in this new language. So how am I going to get it right? And therefore, my listening exam was difficult. However, actually, I cried really bad afterward. But the teacher, you know, the Chinese, they're very nice. They was like, it's okay, you'll do well. And then, so by the end of my tenure there, I was successful in it. Also, to having the opportunity to be there, having been exposed to the culture and whatever you learn, as Vicky would have said, when you go there, you use it. You use it. And something I did that I like, don't take it too seriously. You laugh at yourself. You make mistakes, but you laugh at yourself and you move on. So, you know, have that approach to it. So therefore, as a student, having that outlook, it was easy for me. However, I find as a teacher now, in terms of Barbadian students, Barbadians, I find they are very shy and laid back people. So first of all, to be exposed to the language, oh, the first thing, the attitude, the mindset, oh, that is so difficult to learn. And therefore, you start wrong, you end wrong. Another thing, because of the technical aspects of it too and learning it, I find that teaching it in order to help as adults, because as someone mentioned with children, it's easy for them because they're flexible. But because we have already been accustomed to using our mouth to make certain words and so on, it's difficult with the Chinese language. So for me, the fundamentals, the initials, the final, the tones, make sure that the student get those things correct before you move on, because that is where everything starts. Having that principle, that foundation, because when you're building a house, you have a solid foundation, then you know that your house is strong. And therefore, that foundation is the key. And that is why when I recently listened to a presentation that Vera made, and I too love that illustration she used about going to the doctor. Ah, 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 ah. And also to my musical background, because when I attended school, secondary, I had love music. And do re mi fa sol la ti do, the musical scale, like Desiree made the point. So for me, having that background, I found that that was easy. So using all of those techniques, I try to teach the students so that it would make it easier for them. But like everything else, as Desiree said, you have to really immerse yourself. If you don't immerse yourself, that is something you would not be able to be successful in mastering the language either. When you learn something, because for me at school, I learned French, I learned Spanish, but I am not fluent. If I'm the environment, I could understand and certain things, recall certain things. However, because I was not immersed in the actual environment, I am not as fluent as I would like, but Chinese has been different. So in teaching the student, it is whatever you learn, you have to apply it so to understand. So look for opportunities, go to Chinese restaurants. We only have a few here, but look for Chinese so that whatever you learn, you go and use it. And then you would know if you were saying the correct thing or if you are not saying the correct thing, because Chinese are very kind to you in that they're not going to tell you, oh no, you're saying it incorrectly, but what they would do, they would say it. And then you have to pick up, well, you know what? That is how I should say it. Or they might say, like, well, they don't understand, but they never tell you that you're saying something incorrectly. But practice, practice, practice. And also too, patience is the key. Patient with yourself. And if you're a teacher, you have to be patient with the student, because like several persons mentioned it before, people learn at different rates. Some people grasp things faster than others. So therefore, you cannot compare one with the other in a classroom. You might have students who vary, and sometimes you might become impatient with the slower ones. But what you do, you get the ones who are grasping it faster, you allow them to work with the ones who are slower to help them. So you have to look for certain techniques to use in order to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And therefore, in looking at the Chinese language as that is difficult for me, is a resounding no. It's not difficult, but for others you can understand because of the experiences before and all of these different things that I would have just mentioned. For me, what I like about the Chinese language too is that there's no conjugation. I would prefer to speak Chinese than speak English, to tell the honest truth. Yes, that is how I feel. For me, it's like how I think. I'm a logical thinker, and it's very logical. The characters, if you know the root, you know everything. Show, hand, show, biao, watch, show, finger. Simple, simple, simple. So for me, it is easier than the English. But however, as I said, because of the tones, you have to really practice, 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 as both persons would have made the point. Repetition, repetition, repetition. So for me, there are several tips that I would like to give to a person. First of all, in learning Chinese, you have to determine what is the best time for me to be learning Chinese. We know it's something new. We have to spend some time doing it. But when is that, what is that moment for you? In the morning, in the afternoon, in the night when things are quiet. Then, as you learn the language, you have to make sure that you take notes. Take notes, and even as you speak to, remember you're going to make mistakes. So you laugh at yourself and you continue to move on. Also, too, you have to immerse yourself, as was previously said. You have to think like the Chinese because as we said, the structure, the grammatical structure is different to English and to how we speak. So you really have to immerse yourself so that you can continue to improve. Also, too, certain things you do. Maybe you have, like Desiree says, she uses Duolingo, YouTube, and all of those different things. So that is what you have to do. Next thing, be reasonable with yourself. Don't set unrealistic goals. Set realistic goals. And recently, I don't know if everyone was able to attend the course that the CI just put on Confucius Institute in terms of culture. That was very enlightening for me because there were certain elements of the Chinese culture that I was not familiar with. So if it is put on again, I would suggest that you get that exposure because it looked at the music, it looked at the dynasties, so many different elements. And it was real enlightening for me. Also, too, as I said, have fun. Don't take it so seriously. Go there, enjoy it, speak to persons, and so on. Even write a journal. Where did I start? Where am I now? Where do I want to get? And so that as you reflect, when you look back, for example, Desiree just completed level 2. When you started, where were you? Did you do a journal of starting and then reaching that point to level 2 and continue learning? As Albert would have said, they have so many things because the internet globalization, you know, it helps people to learn the language easily. And now with the relationship that Barbados has with China, there's so much opportunities there. Get opportunity to get scholarships. You can go, we don't even need a visa to get to China. So all of those things are in place. And therefore, in conclusion, the question is the Chinese one of the most difficult languages to learn? It is the actual process of learning a language that might make it difficult based on the premise that learning something new is naturally hard initially, but we all know that it would get better in time. I'm finished.
Okay, thank you, Jocelyn. And let's welcome next person, Stephen.
Hi.
罗思凡.
哎，我的好。
Okay,
Can
let's
you-
welcome our excellent student in China.
thought you said me. I don't know where you got excellent student in China from. Anyway, hi, good evening. I'm Stefan. First of all, thank you, Albert, for the shout out. Very, very appreciative. Albert and I were in China together, 2016, 2017, and it was good having him around, especially in Woodall Call, where we would hang out sometimes. Pardon the dogs, they're not mine. Is Mandarin Chinese difficult to learn? Um, I was going to give this presentation with a whole heap of statistics and figures and stuff with all manner of rhetoric to try to convince you that Mandarin is actually the most fun language in the world. Sure, there are about 100 million people learning Chinese worldwide, but who's counting? Is Chinese difficult to learn? Short answer, yes. Looking at the language from a Western perspective, there is nothing about Mandarin that is easy. If you pick any linguistic aspect of Mandarin, I can spend the whole day telling you how difficult it is. When you think about Mandarin being difficult, what's the first aspect of language that you think of? There are three that I'm going to talk about this evening, and it's only three because I only have 15 minutes. I'm going to try to get that down to like 8 or so. The characters, we heard about the characters earlier. Some people ask, so how many characters are there? Only about 50,000 or so that we know about. These characters date back to about 5,000 years ago when Noah and his family first got out of the ark. Yes, some characters look like what they mean, but that's only like 60% of them that we know of. And those are the pictographic characters. And though they may look like what they mean to Chinese people, they might not look like what you think they look like. For example, sun, the word for sun is a rectangle with a dash in it. As far as we know, the sun is round, right? So it still, to them, looks like what it's supposed to mean. But then even if you could manage to memorize all 50,000 of the characters, there's still the combination of characters that makes hundreds of thousands of words even and more. So for a learner to learn 2,000-3,000 characters, that would be good for them to understand basic signs, menus, the newspaper, etc. And if you think reading them is hard, then writing them is actually a lot more difficult. The stroke order of every character is the same, has always been the same, and will always be the same. If you get the order wrong on any given character and you mess it up, you could ruin the whole sentence. You could ruin the whole book, depending on what it is. Next, we have the tones. This is probably the most famous of the reasons why Mandarin is probably one of the most difficult languages to learn. There are very few languages in the world that are tonal, including Punjabi, Yoruba, Zulu, etc. Mandarin has tones, but the Mandarin's tones are more distinctive. So much so you can change the entire sentence by switching up a tone or two, even if the word is the same. While this makes the language sound melodious, it has its drawbacks for us who are learning the language for the first time. Mandarin has 4 tones. I think Cantonese. I think it was Vicky who was talking about Cantonese earlier. Cantonese has about 9 or 12 different tones. I think I am sticking with the 4, so I'll be comfortable with 4. Yeah. For example, you have tang, and you have tang, 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 tang. We would have covered the different sounds of the tone before. Tang, I don't want to try to explain them and then give you the wrong meaning for the wrong tone. But one means candy, one means soup, one means hot, and one means lying down. Yeah, tang is soup, tang is candy, tang is to lie down, and tang means hot. So if you say one and mean the other, you may end up saying, I want to candy, or this food lie down, and you end up messing yourself up. I once heard of a guy who went to the dumpling store and asked to go to sleep. The waitress said, of course, he's in the wrong place. He wanted shui jiao, and he said he wanted shui jiao. So the waitress said, you're in the wrong place. We don't do that here. Thirdly, and lastly, is the grammar. When you first get to start learning Chinese, some Chinese teachers will tell you Chinese is easy because it has no grammar. Do not believe them. It is easy in that there are no conjugations like how we have in French. Madame Zamora is gone, but in French or in Chinese, in English, Spanish, how we have I walk and she walks, the word itself changes to suit the tense. In Chinese, all the verbs are the same. All of them look the same. The character does not change like the words in English do. However, there are modal particles like le, ne, ba, ma, that change the whole meaning of the sentence. And then just because you put it in the sentence, that doesn't mean that you will get the desired meaning. For example, le, if you put the word le at the end, it would mean something different from if you put it directly after the verb. 我买了苹果，我买苹果了. Two different sentences, two different meanings altogether. So for example, le, we would say that le can mean the action has been completed. So we English speakers, as soon as we hear completed action, we think, oh, good, that means that is the past tense. But if I say 我吃完饭了就给你打电话，我吃完饭了就给你打电话。 which means that I will give you a call when I'm done eating. Yes, the action of eating is still completed, but it's completed in the future. So it's not necessarily past tense. I conclude by saying, I saw somebody, I find this funny, somebody in the chat asked if Stefan has a Chinese girlfriend. No, I'm not that blessed as yet, but I do compare learning Chinese with having a girlfriend. When you have a girlfriend, you spend time with her, you talk to her a lot, you get to explore her personality, you learn her likes and her dislikes. If you're a good partner to your girlfriend, then you'll think about her so much that you may even be able to finish her sentences. Your love for her will compel you to invest yourself in her. Learning Chinese is no different in that if you want to learn it well, I don't know which one is more difficult, Chinese or girlfriends, but if you want to learn it well, then you have to spend time thinking in Chinese, speaking Chinese, listening to Chinese, loving Chinese. That way, your love for the language will compel you to learn it. If you love it, then when you mess up, you will keep trying because you love it. If you don't love it, then as soon as the first sign of difficulty comes, you're out of there. All right. So learning Chinese is difficult, yes. Not as difficult as Lithuanian, by the way. Learning Chinese is difficult, but loving Chinese makes it possible to master. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. Let's welcome the next guest, Renee. Okay, welcome, Renee. Renee, are you in there? Not in there?
Stefan,
Hi, I
please
am
stop.
currently on a call. Just give me 1 second.
Okay.
Stefan, check your mail, please.
Put passport. Okay. Renee are preparing her presentation.
Maybe next one.
赵老师您在吗？不在。
哦，在。
好，那您可以先分享吗？就是 Renee 她说她还要准备一下。
哦，可以，那我来分享屏幕。
Okay, let's welcome our Alex.
Yeah, okay, can you see my screen?
可以。
Yeah, okay, I want to also talk about the... Actually, I don't think the Chinese is very difficult when it comes to speaking or listening. Yeah, but when it comes to the characters, it's a little difficult. And for beginners, I think also, yeah, the tones are a little, yeah, difficult. Yeah. Yeah, this is the material I use when I teach the students. Yeah, for example, when I teach the R, I usually give them a English word like a father. Yeah, R. Yeah, that makes easier for them to learn that. Yeah. Also like this, or here we have the tall, or yeah. Then I will give them some words. Yeah, Chinese words. Yeah, because it makes sense. If you just practice and different tones, but it makes no sense. They can't use them. Yeah, just practice. Yeah, I will give them some specific words to practice. For example, this we say 哥哥 and 和. Yeah, they will learn some words. Yeah, also like this one. Yeah, I teach them the 菠萝 and 鼻子. Yeah, when they learn the pinyin, they can also learn some English, Chinese words. I think that's very useful. Yeah. But I think for beginners, yeah, at first I want to teach them the Chinese characters. But I think for the beginners, it is difficult to learn the characters. Yeah, first they can grasp the pronunciation, yeah, and yeah, the tones. Then maybe when they come to a certain age, a certain stage, they can learn the characters. Yeah, that way it is maybe much easier. Also, maybe for the person, if he just wants to go to China for traveling, maybe they don't have to learn how to write the words. Yeah, they just need to know the listening and speaking. I think that's enough. Yeah. I remember when I was in college, yeah, some of my foreign teachers, they lived in China for many years, but they don't know how to read or how to write Chinese characters, but they can communicate very well with the local people. Yeah, they can understand what they are saying and communicate with them. Yeah, so except if you are going to China to study in college, I think you don't need to learn the characters. Yeah. Also right now, even for Chinese, we don't write characters as often as before. Yeah, for example, for me, right now, maybe I just to fill in some forms, I need to write characters. If other cases, yeah, right now you have the cell phone, computer, you always type. So you know the pinyin and know how to type Chinese characters, it's okay. And then maybe you can know how to recognize the characters. Yeah. Then you can read the newspaper or read all the news. Yeah, I think that's enough. Okay, that's my experience. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for our teacher Alex sharing. And now, Renee, are you okay now?
Hi guys.
Hi, welcome.
Good evening. I've done Chinese way back in 1998 or so till 2003. So my perspective is just a little different, close to Vicky's, but still different. And from what I've heard from most of the other presentations, you've more or less covered everything. Do I think Chinese is the most difficult language to learn? No, I do not. Is it difficult? Like everybody else has said, yes, it is. But in my opinion, I think it's more a case of unfamiliarity that makes it difficult. Also, what Joycelyn has said, your mindset is also part of whether it is a challenge or not. A love for languages will help. A knowledge of music will help. Being a Beijing will also help because we have an affinity for sound, I think. So the initial part for me would be familiarity. And as Desiree had said, I actually do subscribe to her way of thinking with the 3 R's. Because when I went to China in 1998, before I left Barbados, a lot of people who heard about me going were like, so when you get there, you're going to be all ching chong, ching chong. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. But I went with an open mind. And as I told my students during the movie presentation for the core curricular course, a lot of what I learned about China as a country and its culture would have been through the movies that I saw, which back in those days would have been sorry for the
Hi. 我掉线了，还是他掉线？Excuse me, Adwan. Could you hear Renee?
是不是信号不太好？要不你就把那个放一下，那个。
已经55了。
I can't hear her.
啊，院长是要放视频还是要 closing？
放一下吧，放一下，我觉得那个更能起到 wrap up 的作用。
No, we lost her.
Okay, Renee lost. Now, I want to play a short video and to show in foreigners' eyes, is Chinese the most difficult language to learn? Okay, let's see. Nothing here.
work. And yes, having friends in China will also help. So, like Joyson said, I want to finish with this. The lack of conjugation is pure bliss. I am not sure how persons still have challenges with regards to structure, but that lack of conjugation made life so much better, so much, especially when I had my assignments to be writing, and I did a law degree, so I had a lot of writing to do back before all the aids that you have now of the digital era. So that's where I'll end. I don't think it's the most difficult. It is difficult, but you put your mind to it and you can get it done.
Okay, thank you, Renee. And now I will go on playing the video.
中文简单，从国际上来说，应该还是觉得是中文是比较难的吧？它有一个字有很多种意思，对，英文其实也感觉上比汉语应该稍微要简单。All right, so before I actually compare the difficulty of Mandarin or Chinese to that of any other language in the world, I think it's important to distinguish the difference between Chinese and Mandarin. Chinese is the written form of the language itself, the characters, and Mandarin is just a spoken dialect, or 普通话, the common tongue. But why have a written language called Chinese, but the spoken language is called Mandarin? Naturally, you can imagine over thousands of years, a language that doesn't have any inherent phonetic qualities is going to create some disparity in the way that people pronounce each character when they actually read it aloud. They can see it and understand what it means, but without that alphabetic quality, it's hard to make sure that an entire nation is pronouncing these characters the same way. That's why it's necessary to have Mandarin, the common dialect that unifies China so that people not only 看得懂, but also 听得懂. So how is it even possible to learn a language that doesn't have any inherent phonetic qualities? Well, that's where pinyin comes in. Pinyin is the standard romanization system for the Chinese language, and it combines sounds with syllables using the alphabet. It's kind of like the middle ground between English and Chinese. Sure, when comparing the written form of Chinese to that of English, English pales in comparison. Chinese is by far the most complex language in the world as far as the written form is concerned, particularly traditional Chinese.
But from the perspective of a native speaker, the Chinese language actually makes a lot of sense, because even when you see like a really complex character, it's just a combination of more simple components that merge to form a sort of picture. Take a look at this picture, right? Your brain is familiar with these shapes. It's easy to process. And if I showed you this for like a few seconds, you could probably redraw it from memory pretty easily, because you're already familiar with these basic components that form the whole picture. So if you imagine Chinese is basically the same way. In this case, the Chinese character xiang is a combination of tree, heart, and eye. These are basic components, and when you bring them together, it forms this new character. So I did a little experiment where I had my buddy Scott look at the picture, and I had him redraw it from memory a few seconds later. And naturally, he was able to look at the shapes and draw it really easily. Writing the Chinese character was a little bit difficult for Scott, but he actually did pretty well. I was impressed. So here's an example of how the Chinese lexicon works. 医学, 医生, 医院, 医治. So you see that the character yi is in each one of these words. It just makes sense. All these words that have to do with medical terminology contain yi in them. Now look at English. Medical science, doctor, hospital, to treat. All of these things have to do with the field of medicine, but the words couldn't sound any more dissimilar. The Chinese lexicon just makes so much sense, almost to the point of being predictable. As someone who's studying the language, sometimes I can even guess new words just by combining things that seem logical. But now I want to ask you, if you are a native English speaker, have you ever taken a moment to think about just how difficult the English language is to learn from the perspective of a non-native speaker? Why do 8 and 8 have to have the same pronunciation when they're spelled totally differently? Enough, though, through, cough. Why do all these words have the same spelling, but they're pronounced completely differently? Or what about those pesky silent letters like the K in not or no? When you compare this to Chinese, the standard pinyin pronunciation form of the language is 100% consistent to its written form. Also, there's no verb conjugations in Chinese. I mean, what's the point of verb conjugations anyways? I am, you are, she is. Why does the verb to be have to change with each respective person? Chinese makes a lot more sense in this way. There's just no conjugation. Also, there's no verb tense in Chinese. I mean, have you ever thought about the future perfect progressive tense? I will have been eating pizza for 5 minutes when you arrive. Why is it necessary to be precise to such a degree in English? Also, English, there's plural and singular nouns. Right? We tack on the S for plural. Or sometimes we don't tack on the S. There's irregular nouns like man to men, or foot to feet, or fish. Right? There's 10 fish in the water. It's the same as its singular form. It's so inconsistent. It must be so confusing for a non-native speaker learning the language. So, is Chinese the most difficult language in the world? From my perspective, from a native English speaker perspective, I think it's pretty darn complex. But from the perspective of a Chinese person, say, who's learning English, I think that they're fair to assume that English is the most complex language in the world. So it really depends on who you ask. I've been in Yangshuo for the last couple months here. I'm studying Mandarin at Omeida Chinese Academy, and I've really improved a lot of my Mandarin since being here. The classes are small, the teachers are really friendly, and if you're thinking about studying Chinese in China, I cannot.
Okay, the video finished. And thank you every teacher join today's activity, join today Chinese Corner. And now welcome our co-director, David Bouvillier, to the closing remark.
Okay, thank you very much, Ferry, and thank you on behalf of co-director Lee and my own behalf to all of the presenters for a most interesting and enlightening afternoon. I was going to say up until the time I saw and heard that video, that situation, and in fact for me a deeper understanding on both sides, an English speaker learning Chinese and a Chinese person trying to learn English. Certainly believe it is a difficult language to learn. I've convinced myself that I will only learn any Chinese really when I'm immersed in it, when I'm thrown into the environment and have to survive by first stringing together a few words to make myself understood, to live, to eat, to, to get entertainment, to see interesting things, to basically communicate with people around me. So I don't really see myself sitting in a classroom and learning it. One might say that after 2.5 years at Confucius Institute, why haven't I learned any more Chinese? And it's because I've been so far, they've allowed me to get by with speaking English. But I know also I'm learning Chinese from a different perspective. That is, I'm understanding something of the ways of Chinese and not so much at this point about the language. But anyhow, I think it was a very interesting and very useful way to conclude this session of the Chinese Corner, to give or to have perspectives from different persons, the newcomer like Miss Desiree, persons who have studied in China, like Stefan. I might not name everyone at this point in time, and Renee, persons who teach Chinese, Vera and Alex. I may not necessarily mention everyone, so forgive me if I don't. So everybody brought a different perspective and a different piece of knowledge to this understanding. I think we are all here for a better understanding of Chinese and things Chinese. And I think that this session has contributed to that knowledge. So once again, to thank, I believe it was Grace who conceptualized this final session for this year. Thanks to Ferry for the arrangements made for it. And again, thanks to all of the presenters for a very interesting and enlightening afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ferry. Wonderful. Good job, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Same to you.